That's too much, isn't it?
So where are you from?
I'm Recovery Films, community interest company.
Okay. Then we have Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda Kerr. I'm the office manager at Homestart, Clackmannanshire.
Sandra, I'm assuming that's not your name.
No, I'm Scott. I'm for the Housekeeping Community Centre and I'm the youth team leader.
Cool. Rob Alexander.
Hello, Rob Alexander, Forth Valley Recovery Community Assistant Recovery Worker.
Nicola Whedon.
Hi, I'm the adult team lead for Falkirk and Clackmannanshire Carers Centre.
Gemma Alva.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gemma Waghorn. I'm representing Alva Development Trust.
Louise Walker.
Hi there, my name's Louise. I'm the Volunteer Development Assistant at CTSI.
George McCall.
Hello there, I'm George McCall and I'm the Secretary from the Socky and Fish Cross Community Council.
Caroline Hunter. Oh, you're on mute, Caroline.
Sorry, I'm Caroline Hunter and I'm a community health champion, volunteer and also a parent carer.
Joe.
Yeah, hello, my name is Joe. I'm a recovery development worker at Forth Valley Recovery Community.
Joanne Stewart.
Hi, I'm Joanne Stewart. I'm one of the volunteers that Resonate Together, working in the community.
Elle Brown, you don't have a camera on.
I haven't got a camera, sorry. My name's Leah Brown and I work with the Menstrie Community Council.
Thank you. I think we've got somebody's called Play. I don't know who you are, but your name comes up as Play.
So that is Sharon, who's the HR manager at Play Alloa. She's just popped a wee message in the chat to explain her video and microphone aren't working, but she can hear and see everything. So if she's got any thoughts or anything, she'll just pop them in the chat and I can channel them through me.
Fabulous, thank you. Craig Marsland, sorry.
Hello, I'm a young carer support worker for the Falkirk and Clackmannanshire Young Carers Project.
Patricia.
Hi, I'm Patricia. I'm a women's support worker based at Refuge for Clackmannanshire Women's Aid.
Thank you. Keda Williams.
Hi, I'm a community health champion and manager at Sterling Books.
And Christina Mullen.
Hi, I'm chair of the Parent Council at Redwell Primary School and I'm also the Child Protection Officer at All Saints Football Club.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so I think, unless I've missed anyone, speak now, forever hold your peace. Fabulous. Okay, Julie did point in at the chat box there. I'm not sure if everybody saw it. Today's session will be recorded. If you do not wish your lovely little faces to be recorded, you can turn your camera off should you wish to do so. Yep, Sandra fixing your hair there, that's a good look. The way it'll work for today is basically we should be about 2 hours or so, so take us about to 12 o'clock. We'll have a wee comfort break in about an hour, just a wee 5 minutes, and the vast majority of the session will be screen share, so I'll be showing your presentation and myself basically having a chat and going through a variety of slides. There's a couple of practical things. You may or may not have received a quiz. If you did, great, I hope you had a chance to look at it. If you didn't, don't worry, it's not that interesting. The point of the quiz is just to see what your current knowledge is, where your current understanding is in terms of risk assessment and health and safety. So what I'm going to do just now is get everybody muted. So I'm going to mute everybody just now. Louise, you're still muted, but if you need to unmute yourself, feel free to do so. Like I mentioned, if at any point you have any comments, questions, things you want to ask or check, do feel free to just pop that in the chat box, and that will pop up during the session, and Louise and myself can keep an eye on that. So we will keep a wee eye on that. I may not necessarily answer your question immediately if it's not pertinent, or I know it's going to be answered in the next slide. And there will be a Q&A session at the very end. Now, in my screen just now with the screen share on, I can see myself and I can see Louise. So Louise, I'm going to take your little face as my indicator for everything being good and okay, if you can see anyone else. So today we're talking about risk assessing coronavirus. We're specifically talking about the fact that there is a global pandemic on just now and what we as organisations can do on it about it. Today's session is specifically focused at organisational responsibility and accountability in terms of health and safety law. This is something which applies to individual persons. Each individual person has responsibility for their own health and safety and those around them. Something to also bear in mind is if I use the word staff, I mean staff, volunteers, employees, managers, board members. When we talk about health and safety, it's not like employment law. In employment law, there is clear definitions for workers, employees, volunteers, etc. Under health and safety, it is persons acting on behalf of the organisation. So it's really important to remember that anybody within the premises, including the public, health and safety does apply, and the organisation has overall responsibility and accountability. So like I mentioned, my name is Natasha Gordon, and I provide HR, employment law and health and safety support to third sector organisations across Scotland. If you are interested in receiving more information about the HR service or the GCBS services in whole, just let me know at the end of the session. Like I said, we should be about 2 hours and we will have Q&A at the end. Any documents which I refer to during the session will be sent out to everybody after the session. So risk assessment template, example risk assessment, copy of the slides and the recording. So everything referred to during the session will be sent out afterwards, and we'll have a comfort break in about an hour time. So the purpose of today's session is to understand law and liability. Like I mentioned, it's not just organisational liability, it is also individual liability, which is really important to remember. How to identify hazards and risks, what control measures are and how to put them into place, and human life. That is the cost of bad practice. It is people who will die if we act inappropriately. And that applies to all health and safety. But coronavirus is a deadly virus, a deadly disease. Corona is the virus and COVID is the disease. So you might have the virus, but it doesn't necessarily mean it will transform into the disease. The virus is like the cold, the disease is like the flu. So one has a mild impact on your immune system and your body treats it like a cold. The other one actually attacks your body and gets your body to attack itself. And that's where the disease comes in and which can be deadly. So what we're going to do is, before we go touch on to the quiz, I'm going to quickly cover, no, I'm lying, I've taken out the quiz slide helpfully. So before I go over the law, I'm going to go into the quiz. For some reason, I've taken that slide out of the session. I was updating it this morning and also didn't realise. This is why I'm very, very grateful we're recording the session, because it makes me look really incompetent whilst being recorded. Awesome. So what we're going to do is temporarily stop the screen share so I can see all your wonderful faces again. Hello, wonderful faces. So what we're going to do is if you put your hand up when you think the answer is correct, and we'll see, there's only 8 questions in the quiz. If you didn't get a chance to have a look at it before the session or you didn't receive, don't worry, you can answer it now or you can just ignore it. There's only 8 questions, so you've got a maximum of 8 points. Do bear in mind you're scoring yourselves, so you only have yourselves to answer to. Whatever you score yourselves is up to you. I don't actually care, it doesn't bother me, I get paid either way. The first question was, the first step in risk assessing is. We've got 4, we've got A, B, C, D for each question. So put your hand up when you think the answer is right. So the first step in risk assessing is record your findings, evaluate the risk, identify the hazard, decide who could be harmed. Yep, identify the hazards. So yep, if you got yourself that one, you get 1 point. Who should carry out the risk assessment? The HSE, the manager, competent person, staff member. It is competent person, but I'm going to go over a lot of that specifically because there's quite an interesting issue about competency. and the fact that the manager and the staff member should do it together, but there's no legal definition of competency. So to be competent, you just need to be competent and confident, but there's no legal definition. So if you were to stand up in court to defend your actions or your behaviours in terms of carrying out a risk assessment, you need to justify how you consider yourself to be competent. Who's at most at risk in the workplace? Okay, customers, full-time staff, visitors, people with disabilities. It's full-time staff. The reason being, if you're in the workplace, so we're not talking about home working just now, we're talking about within the workplace. If you're there 35, 40 hours a week, the risk is higher of you being exposed to potential hazards and health and safety because you're there longer. Somebody else, a visitor or somebody with disabilities might just pop in for 5 minutes. So the chances are, so when we're talking about who's most at risk, full-time members of staff are there the most. A written record of risk assessments must be in place if you have how many staff? 2 or more? 5 or more? 10 or more? 25 or more? It's 5 or more. So if you have fewer than, not less than, fewer than 5 staff, you do not need a written risk assessment. However, if again you're standing up in court and the judge says, where's your written risk assessment? You go, Mr. Judge, I don't need a written risk assessment. I've only got 3 staff. No, that's not going to wash at all in the slightest. So good practice, always have written risk assessments because it mitigates your liabilities. When should risk assessments be updated? When new staff start? Every year? When you're audited? Or as and when required? Yeah, it's as and when required. You could literally need to update it, especially with coronavirus. Things are changing daily with coronavirus, let alone weekly, monthly. So these risk assessments, a normal risk assessment like your manual handling, fire, COSH, RIDDOR, etc., they only need to be done as and when required. But coronavirus, probably quite a lot. So as and when required is actually as and when required. So it could be daily or it could be monthly or yearly. Accident investigation is necessary for what purpose? Recording and reporting an accident. Making a rapid conclusion about the causes of the accident. Defending the company against the HSE. Or identifying and evaluating indirect and underlying causes. Yep, it's the indirect and underlying. So we want to know the real reason. We don't want to just jump in and get the answer. We want to know how this happened, why it happened, what could we do to prevent it from happening again. How many office admin staff died at work in 1920? Now this is an interesting one. So 104 people died at work during 2019-2020, that 12-month period. How many office staff died? None. 1. 6. 10. It was 6. So 6 office staff died at work out of 102 people. That's ridiculous. That's like 5% of all at work deaths were in the office. Now, to be fair, we don't know if that was because somebody had a heart attack at work or somebody slipped down a flight of stairs, but 6 people at offices died. And the best control measure, PPE, that's personal protective equipment in case anybody doesn't know. Elimination, substitution, management controls. It's elimination. We want to eliminate all hazards, all risks to make sure we protect people as much as possible. It's to protect the health, safety and well-being, mental and physical, of all within our premises. Staff, volunteers, employees, workers, public, you name it, anybody within our premises. Okay, so you only have yourselves to answer for, or answer to even, with regards to your how well you did there. So what we're going to do now is go back to the screen share. If I use a lot of acronyms, just to let you know, I usually explain them, but if for whatever reason I don't, or you're not sure what an acronym is, just let me know and I will reiterate that. So what we're going to talk about just now is the law. Now, HR and health and safety has a big significant crossover in terms of application of the law. But today we're specifically talking about health and safety, and we're specifically talking about risk assessing, and specifically to do with coronavirus. So I'm going to basically summarise the laws which mostly apply when we're talking about health and safety within the workplace. Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. Now, prior to 1974, there wasn't a Health and Safety at Work Act. There was a dozen different acts. Every single industry sector had its own. So agriculture, mechanics, offices, buildings, factories, every single different workplace had different laws and regulations which applied. And the reason why we needed an act is because the government had absolutely no idea how many people went to work in the morning and didn't come home at night. That's what death at work means. It means you go to work in the morning and you don't come home at night. So the Health and Safety at Work Act basically amalgamated every single law there was, updated it, made sure there was appropriate regulations, procedures, policies, and legal legislation for all sectors, industries, etc. And the HSE, which is the Health and Safety Executive in Scotland, is the main body in Scotland which covers all health and safety. There is only one sector which actually isn't covered with HSE, which is the railways, which have their own health and safety body, which is a random interesting fact for you. Pardon me. Now, the management regs came in 1999, and the reason why they were required is because between 74 and 99, too many people were dying. So too many people were going to work and not coming home. So that 25-year period, the government basically realised somebody would go to work and die. They would look into it and go, oh, okay, so there was a big roof there, somebody fell off the roof, right, we'll put a guard in. Somebody else would go to work and die, they fell down a hole, right, okay, we'll put a cover over that. Somebody else would die, oh, they got caught in a machine, right, we'll cover that. So basically for a 25-year period, everything was retrospective. People would go to work, get killed or maimed or injured, life-threatening injuries, life-changing injuries, and they would all be retrospective. So somebody would get hurt and then the organisation would go in and fix it. So nobody would get hurt again. But the Management 99 regs state that before any task is performed by anyone acting on behalf of an organisation, it must be risk assessed. So you cannot have somebody doing any task whatsoever unless a risk assessment has been done before they do it. So if you have somebody acting on your behalf, going to the office or doing whatever, manual handling, dealing with anything within the premises, food hygiene, you name it, no matter what it is, a risk assessment must be put in place prior to them performing that task. That's the law. Manslaughter and homicide. So manslaughter is England, homicide is Scotland. And this act came in 2007. And this act basically says that it's no longer an organisational responsibility. So what again would happen was somebody would get hurt or injured or maimed, killed, etc. And the organisation would get a fine. What now happens is the organisation gets a fine and the individual person responsible goes to court and has to stand in front of the judge and explain their actions. So if somebody has not carried out a risk assessment, they are the one that is responsible. If they have carried out a risk assessment and somebody doesn't comply with it, then they're the ones who's responsible. If you carry out a risk assessment and you identify control measures, but you don't put those control measures in place, you're responsible. So it's individual responsibility as well as corporate liability. It's really important that those in responsible positions understand that it is individual liability these days. This is not to put the fear into you at all. A lot of people do panic when they think they're potentially liable, but you're not liable if you do what you're meant to do. So that's why you're at this session today. You're at the session today to learn what you need to do, and therefore you go and do it. COSH is control of substances hazardous to health. Now, this doesn't necessarily just apply to bleach and acid. It applies to any substance whatsoever which could potentially be hazardous to health, which includes hand sanitizer, hand wash, dishwasher stuff, washing up liquid, and air spray, air freshener, literally any substance whatsoever which, if ingested or in direct contact with skin or eyes, etc., could result in a reaction, whether allergic or otherwise. Something to bear in mind, if you have any substances in your premises whatsoever, you must have something called a safety data sheet, which is a requirement for any substance. And if you go onto Google and you type in Asda lemon washing up liquid safety data sheet, the safety data sheet for Asda lemon washing up liquid will appear because it's a legal requirement that organisations who produce chemicals or substances make these safety data sheets public. So air fresheners, hand sanitizer, hand wash, basically a bleach, toilet cleaner, whatever you've got on your premises, you need to have a safety data sheet. But you go into Google and you type in the product and a safety data sheet will come up. If you can't find it on Google, you just contact the organisation direct and they'll send it to you because it's a requirement. The reason why you need a safety data sheet is if somebody comes into contact with a substance and they have a reaction to it and you need to obtain medical advice, then you can tell them, you can either give them the safety data sheet if it's ambulance or whomever medical professionals arrive, or you can talk to somebody over the phone like NHS 111 and explain, you know, the chemicals contained within that safety data sheet in case there's a known chemical that causes an issue. RIDOR is Reporting of Injuries, Diseases and Dangerous Occurrence Regulations. If you didn't get that, don't worry, you can Google it as well. Reporting of Injuries, Diseases and Dangerous Occurrence Regulations. Now, like I mentioned, COVID is a disease. If somebody gets COVID as a direct result of the workplace, it is RIDOR reportable, which means you have to go onto the HSE website, you have to fill in the form and they will decide whether or not to investigate. It seems highly unlikely they will because COVID is a pandemic and it's everywhere. But basically, it has to be a direct. So for example, if you go to a restaurant and you get COVID from that restaurant, then that restaurant would have to go to RIDOR and report the fact that somebody got it. So it's a direct result of going to a specific place. So if somebody got it as a direct result of coming to your premises, then you should pop onto the website of the HSE, which is a Health and Safety Executive, and just let them know, fill out the wee form, and chances are they won't investigate and they won't come back to you, but do it anyway. Okay. That is all. That is a very brief summary about the law and the implications of the law. We will talk about this throughout the entire session, so just in case you're interested about more, it will be covered throughout. But before we move on to the next slide, I just want to check to see if anybody has any comments or questions. You can pop them in the chat box if you do. Okay, cool. I'll assume then, oh, hang on. I am an employer from the SDS. Training should be rolled out. If you're welcome to pay me to do so. So I deliver training on health and safety and HR subjects, and these sessions cost £200 per session. You can contact me directly if you want me to do it deliberately, specifically for your organisation or your network. I'm happy to do so. The recording will be available, but I'm not sure. You need to check with CTSI, Louise. I don't know if you're going to want it shared across the network, or you would rather it was delivered it direct. There is benefits and negatives. Watching a recording can be challenging for people to focus and comprehend and understand all the subject. Whereas attending direct training, it's not very expensive, it's only £200 per session, and it gives everybody the opportunity to attend, be participative, interactive, ask questions, to make sure there is understanding. Risk assessing is applicable to everybody, to be honest. It's a legal requirement, let alone a necessity, and best practice as well. So whether it's about coronavirus or any other subject whatsoever, risk assessment is a necessity, and being competent to carry out risk assessments is certainly a good thing to do. I hope that helps, Carolyn. Caroline.
Sorry, can I ask?
Yes.
So NHS do their own risk assessments within my package. Does that mean that I would follow their risk assessments as an employer, as a separate employer from the NHS, with my staff who are doing the same job?
So it depends. So you would need to assess their risk assessment to see if it was suitable and appropriate for your team. specifically for the work you do, the locations you deliver it in, loan working, home working, being out and about, moving and handling, slip, trips and falls, COSH, you name it, you would have to make sure that that risk assessment was applicable to your team. If it is, then yes, go for it, absolutely. If it's not, then you might need to review it, adapt it, alter it to yourselves. You could use it as a template and just adapt it to suit, but it may be that it is suitable. So, thank you. Phase 3, now this is interesting. Whilst we have, I'll go through the level shortly of the 5 levels within Scotland, but we're actually technically still in phase 3. So you may remember originally we weren't even in a phase, and then we passed through phases 1 and 2 very, very quickly. And then we went into phase 3, but this still kind of stands as an overall. The 5 levels of specific local authorities does apply, but these are very indicative of what the current kind of restrictions in place. So it goes into a wee bit more detail. Now you'll see indicative date for review was the 24th of August. Obviously, if everything is changing, everything is subject. Pardon me, but this gives you an idea of the rough ideas. Interestingly, I don't know if anybody knows about swimming pools, but swimming pools are kind of opening slightly. I spoke to Glasgow Club the other day, and what they've advised is, which is weird because you'll see swimming pools in indoor is under review, and they're kind of reopening. So basically what Glasgow Club told me the other day was anybody who had a membership prior to lockdown and did not cancel that membership is currently able to go swimming. Anyone who had a membership prior to lockdown and did cancel their membership will be the next group, the next level to be offered the opportunity to go swimming. So basically they're kind of just opening up on a tiered basis so that they can restrict numbers, manage it, see the amount of interest, etc. So swimming pools are slowly opening, but they're not necessarily opening completely. And the important thing to remember is regardless of what tier you're in, social distancing and face masks are a requirement if you're indoors. The only reason why you wouldn't wear a face mask indoors is if you're eating, drinking, or participating in physical exercise. The other reason being if you have a health condition. The health condition thing can be quite awkward because I have asthma. It's not very severe, but when I'm walking around the supermarket, I'm moving about, maybe breathing a wee bit heavier, I kind of struggle with a mask. But if I take the mask off, the amount of dirty looks I get is just horrific. So generally, I just suffer and wear the mask. And especially, for those of you who wear glasses as well, they just steam up instantly and you can't actually see anyway. But yeah, asthma and steam glasses are a winning combination. If I'm with somebody else, who, like one of my friends or something, or my husband or whatever, I'm okay to, I feel comfortable. But by myself, I don't feel comfortable not wearing a mask because the amount of looks you get. An interesting one in the view of a mask is to consider the mask the same way you do your underwear. Okay, so your underwear, you change it regularly. If it's dirty, you change it. You don't touch it and you don't share it with other people. And most importantly, you keep your bits covered. So wearing a face mask that only covers your mouth and leaves your nose exposed is completely pointless. And I don't know why anyone would do that, because if you're going to then breathe through your nose, there's literally no point wearing the mask in the first place. So yeah, think of it the same way as your underwear. And it's actually quite a funny analogy to use for your staff as well. And it will encourage them to comply because they'll find the humour in it. So you change your underwear regularly, you don't fiddle with it, you keep your bits covered, change it when dirty and change it regularly anyway. So when we're looking at the levels of not lockdown, now the levels here are specifically more about social activities. When we're looking at the phase 3, you can see these are all businesses that we're looking at and activities. So these, the phase 3 explained there, the 2 slides. You'll see though non-essential offices can reopen, but that's not been agreed yet. So non-essential offices and call centres hasn't been agreed as reopening as yet. But service provision doesn't count for that. And for the levels in our tiers, This relates to social activities. It does not relate to work. So a lot of the questions I get asked is how many staff can we have together? You know, we've got 2 volunteers, you know, can we have 3 volunteers, but they're often different households. So these tiers relate to social activities. If it's to deliver services, act on behalf of an organisation, provide support, community centres, whatever it is, if you're working, then the 6 and 2 household thing does not apply. Social distancing applies, and the face masks and your PPE and your extra protections, etc. But the social activities are not necessarily relevant. So when we look at level 0, there is no local authorities. There's 32 local authorities in Scotland. There's currently no local authority in level 0. There is also no local authority in level 4. So level 0 and level 4 aren't there at all. England is obviously having its level 4 lockdown just now, so basically it's almost completely shut, and it will be until the start of December. In Scotland, we've got medium high and very high, so these vary just now. Glasgow and the Central Belt, the vast majority of the Central Belt is level 3. There's a lot in level 2, and I think there's a few in level 1, but not a significant amount. Basically, this means that we are very, very restricted in Glasgow, but this is social activities. So Clackmannanshire, I don't know what you guys are. I apologise, I'm not from there. I didn't check. I will admit that. Louise, what level are you in just now?
We're level 3.
You're level 3 as well. I presume because Central Belt. So basically the whole of the Central Belt is currently level 3. Nicola Sturgeon is announcing in government today in Holyrood whether or not that will change. Let's be realistic, it's not going to change. Level 3 is likely to stay in place for a significant period of time. The reason being all UK government want Christmas to happen and people to have a nice Christmas by being able to see each other. The UK government did announce there might be a nationwide, i.e. the whole of the UK, self-isolation requirement after Christmas, so 2-week self-isolation period for everybody, and that would be to make sure that anybody who has socialised during the Christmas period self-isolates to avoid any potential risk of exposure or spreading. So risk assessing and volunteers, okay? So a lot of third sector organisations have volunteers. So it is important to bear in mind that volunteers do come under your health and safety, which includes your board members. So your board members are volunteers. Now, the responsible person, okay, now the board members themselves have a responsibility, and the owner of the hall, whether that's the organisation or the local authority, so the owner of the premises has overall responsibility for ensuring the regular and deep cleaning and ensuring that's adhered to. This will form part of the risk assessment, and frequency will depend how often the premises are used, how many people, what the age groups are, whether there's underlying health conditions, what the potential risks are, the risk factors. The responsible persons are basically the powers that be, those in charge. If you think about it, the board members themselves wouldn't do the cleaning, but they would ensure the cleaning was done. The responsibilities relate to ensuring that the premises are suitable, safe and hygienic. So for example, if you have an exposure, somebody says they've got corona, you would then need to shut the premises and do a deep clean. So it's ensuring that you understand the responsibilities for the responsible persons. Every single person is responsible for their own health and safety and that of those around them. But the more senior the person within the organisation, the higher level of accountability. So the management need to ensure that there's risk assessment done in terms of cleaning, PPE, social distancing, one-way systems, protected areas, protected seating, ensuring that all that is in place. And the management are responsible for ensuring compliance. So that means whether it's a public or staff, you're responsible for ensuring that everybody within the premises complies with the terms of the risk assessment. So you would make sure your staff are aware of the risk assessment and the control measures in place, and you would make sure they ensure compliance with members of the public. Now, the interesting one about risk assessments, which comes up almost every time I do this, is this is just for you to ask yourself. You don't need to tell me because you need to admit to this one way or another. But does your organisation have risk assessments of any kind, ignoring the coronavirus, any risk assessments whatsoever? Do you have risk assessments within your organisation? The next question then is, where are they? Okay, so can anyone actually access those risk assessments? Are they stored on a shared drive that's password protected for the manager only? Are they kept in the manager's office in a locked filing cabinet? Having risk assessments is wonderful, but having risk assessments that are locked away in a secure little wonderful location is completely pointless. Policies, procedures and risk assessments are there for staff. They're there to protect and advise staff on their responsibilities. So having them locked away or on a secure drive is completely pointless. Again, imagine you were going to court to defend your actions and you go, oh, no, we've got all these risk assessments. We've got a dozen risk assessments. They're all fabulous. And the judge says, that's great. Does anybody know you've got them? You know, when was the last time you actually showed your staff the fact you have risk assessments? So really, really important. If you have risk assessments, you share them and you make sure your staff know where they are. Recording cleaning is really, really important as well, because if you have someone who could test positive or thinks they might test positive, you need to know when the premises was last deep cleaned, as well as regular cleaning. Now, the cleaning is organisational dependent. When it comes to health and safety, I don't know if everybody's heard the term reasonably practicable. Now, reasonably practicable does not have a legal definition. It basically means what is actually appropriate for your organisation. If you have a community centre which opens once a fortnight for a group of 3 people who are all in their 30s, you're not going to need a deep clean. You know, a clean of wherever they happen to be would be fine. If you're open 7 days a week, you've got elderly people, vulnerable people, people with underlying health conditions, you're going to need cleaning maybe even more than once a day, a couple of times a day, as well as regular deep cleaning. I can't tell you what you should have. That's the point of doing a risk assessment. You assess the risk. What is the risk? What is the exposure level to the virus? If the exposure level to the virus is going to be significant and the potential outcome is death, then we need to make sure that we assess the risk appropriately and we control measures. Control measures are what prevent people from being exposed to the hazards. The hazard is exposure to the virus. So record your cleaning so you have an accurate record. The sharing equipment part does actually come up quite a lot because you've got people, now even if it's a kitchen facility, you know, you've got people sharing kettles, fridges, cutlery, drawers, cabinets, doors, seats, chairs, tables. If anybody is sharing equipment, you should be cleaning it before and after use, okay? So if you have, say for example, you've got a computer that you use for hot desking purposes, the entire workstation should be cleaned before somebody uses it and after somebody uses it. The reason being, so say for example, I come into the office and Susan has just left. I don't know Susan's cleaned it properly. She might have given it a quick once over, she might have given it a really thorough deep clean. But I want to protect myself and I want to protect those whom I live with. So it's really important that I take responsibility for my own health and safety and I make sure that I give my workstation a clean. So it's not just about the managers making sure that it's cleaned, it's making sure that each individual person understands that if they're going to use a phone, they clean it before they use it and afterwards. If they're going to use a photocopier, a kettle, a fridge, a washing machine, a cupboard, cutlery drawer, every single thing that you touch, you should be cleaning your hands and cleaning the item, or wear gloves, which you dispose of appropriately. You could have, for example, if you get a kitchen area, have hand sanitizer outside the kitchen, so people have to use it on the way in. But you should also be cautious about people sharing items and sharing use, because the virus, the biggest part of the virus is aerosol, which is your breath. and touching surfaces, sharing touching surfaces. I don't want to be exposed to the virus. I don't know if you've been in the supermarket and you see people who pick up items and put them back down and pick up other ones, put them back down. That stresses me out like you wouldn't believe. I'm like, don't touch it unless you're going to buy it. You know, the world is different, and it's. I don't know if the world will ever go back to what it was realistically. Something like 87% of people work from home now. That's not going to go back down to zero. Well, it's never zero, but you know what I mean? It's not going to change. I don't have to work from the office. I can work from home. I have my full PC setup and I have everything I need. So when people touch things, that's when the risk is. So that's when you need to be really cautious. So cleaning before and after use. L. Brown, I can't remember your first name, apologies. In terms of COVID, what's the difference between a clean and a deep clean? So a clean is, it doesn't have to be an external organisation or an external cleaning company, but basically a clean is, you know, like you clean your kitchen, for example, you clean the worktops, you clean your sink, etc. A deep clean would be taking everything out your cupboards, cleaning within, cleaning what's in your cupboards, bleaching your worktops, bleaching your sink. You know, so it's the difference between, you know, think about you cleaning your bathroom, you know, giving your bathroom a quick wipe compared to taking everything out your bathroom, giving it a good scrub, proper scrubber, bleach, etc. I don't know if anybody's heard of foggers. Foggers have got a really good reputation because basically what they do is they'll release a kind of mist, which is antibacterial and antiviral, because antibacterial, bear in mind it's a virus, so we need antiviral stuff. But basically what they do is sanitize a premises. So you basically you hire a fogger, bring it in, you know, once a week, once a fortnight, once a month, whatever you deemed appropriate under your risk assessment. And it basically gets fog into everything. If you've ever seen a powder fire extinguisher being released, never, from a health and safety perspective and a fire warden perspective, don't use a powder fire extinguisher. If you use a powder fire extinguisher inside, anything that powder goes to basically just needs chucked out because you can never use it again. You can't get, because powder is so minuscule, the particles are so tiny. But that's the benefit of a fogger, because the fogger gets into everything with it. It doesn't damage anything, though. Foggers do not damage, that's kind of the point. But the particles that the fogger releases gets basically into everything. You can hire companies to come in and do a deep clean, but a deep clean basically means floor to ceiling. You know, and proper scrubby, you know, bleach or otherwise appropriate substance. Obviously, you need your COSH, your what's it called? Safety data sheet. Russell Williamson Fenton, that's a great name, by the way. What about Nullback Dry Touch Sanitizer Spray? What about it? Would be my response to that. I have no idea. You'd need a safety data sheet. You just mean spraying it around? Don't know. You need to check the product information to see what that dry touch sanitizer spray should be used for. It might just be it should be used for hand sanitizing only, or it could be used for surface sanitizing. I don't know. You need to check the manufacturer information on that. There you go. Louise is advising that All Cleaned Up, which is an Apex social enterprise. So hey, third sector, let's support them. They've got a fogger and a service. So if you're interested, get in touch. Russell, you've said it's for the whole macrooms. I'm assuming that was a typo and you mean rooms. I don't know. You need to check the manufacturer's information for that to see what it would or would not be appropriate to use for. Okay. Before we move on to the next slide, any more comments or questions? Cool. Nope. PPE, which is personal protective equipment. So PPE covers everything from face masks, visors, aprons, gloves, shoe covers, etc. It's anything which you put on your body. Okay. We talked about face masks. Now visors are a good thing if you have an underlying health condition such as claustrophobia or asthma or anxiety, etc., and you struggle with a face mask. But a visor does not substitute a face mask. If you wear a visor, you should actually wear a face mask as well. What a visor does is it provides extra protection. So say, for example, somebody coughs or sneezes in your locale, the visor will protect your eyes, because obviously you can absorb through your eyes, through your skin, etc. So face mask covers you breathing in and out. So if you're infectious, knowingly or otherwise, and you breathe out, it's filtered a bit by the face mask. I mean, don't get me wrong, unless you have a full industrial proper face-fitted face mask, the wee disposal ones, the protection they provide is some protection. It's better than nothing. But what it does is, if you cough or sneeze, it stops the vast majority of those particles being expressed into the air. If somebody coughs or sneezes near you, it stops the big particles of that coming through into your breathing. A visor also protects your facial skin and your eyes, which you can absorb through as well. Yeah, so if you've got staff who have underlying health conditions or anxiety or otherwise, a visor can be used. So if they say, "Oh, I can't wear a mask," get them a visor or get them both. You know, so staff and volunteers, that is a requirement that the organisation provide this. Now that's whether they're within the centre, whether they're going out about, they are acting on behalf of the organisation. So nobody acting on behalf of an organisation should be out of pocket of reasonable expenses. Protecting your health, safety and well-being is a basic right of anyone. So it's really important that you ensure the appropriate PPE is provided to your staff. It may include individual hand sanitizer bottles. One thing you do have to bear in mind though is some people have skin allergies. Hand sanitizer is usually alcohol based and it causes skin to be very, very dry. So you might also have to provide them with moisturizer. You also need to provide them with a copy of the safety data sheet just in case, or have it available within the premises. You can have a folder with all your safety data sheets in it, and just so as long as staff know where they are. Aprons, perhaps if they're doing food hygiene or supporting service users. Gloves, again, it depends what they're doing. So this is part of your risk assessment. So you're going to risk assess your staff, your premises, the activities and the exposure. You're going to have a look to see, right, okay, so I've got staff, they provide telephone support as a befriending service. The risk there is very, very low, but what you need to do in terms of physical exposure from person to person, you'd have the equipment, the workstation, etc. Social distancing, you would have the perspex screens between everybody, and there is now law that if you're moving around communal areas, i.e. if you're going from your desk to the kitchen or to the bathroom, you need to wear a mask between one and the other. So if you're going from your desk to the kitchen to make a cup of tea, you need to put your mask on, and you should be washing your hands before and after, or washing the equipment before and after, or both. For visitors, this is a different matter. So, a bit awkward one. If you go to a supermarket and you don't wear a face mask because you're selfish and you don't care about yourself or others, you don't care about the exposure, you're just doing it. I know you'll see there are people who do this. You get a lot of people who just go, nah, I don't believe in the virus. I'm not concerned about the risk. I'm 23. I'm not, going to get hurt. They don't care about the fact that their nana is 89. They don't care about the fact that they could expose other people. But the supermarket technically can't do anything. You can't physically eject somebody from a premises because that would potentially be assault. All the supermarket could do would be phone the police. Don't get me wrong, the police will hold a stern view because the police are getting much, much stricter. Did you hear about the 700-person rave that happened recently? So it was a rave with 700 people at it. The organisers get charged £10,000 too, right? But the 700 people didn't get a fine. Those 700 people go, yeah, we went to a rave, we had a good time, then we left. They're going to go to the next rave and the next rave and the next rave. Each individual person should have been charged £500. They're not going to go to another one. The police are getting stricter as we go, but even so, they're not necessarily doing as much as they could. But when it comes to visitors to your premises, you can't physically eject somebody. You can deny them entry, but if they barge into you, basically you need to phone the police. But what you should be doing before anybody attends your premises, if you have service users who are IT literate, you can send them a wee pre-visit questionnaire. You shouldn't be just having people turn up and walk into your premises. because that makes it very, very challenging for social distancing, for maximum numbers, etc. And again, this is part of your risk assessment. You need to figure out how much space do you have in your premises and how many people can you have in your premises in order to comply with social distancing. You remember I mentioned you can have as many staff and volunteers as you need, but you still need social distancing. You can have 1 metre, providing you let everybody know that they're coming to the premises is a 1 metre area. So they are coming into that and they all need to wear masks, etc. I would recommend ensuring that visitors, you know, even if you don't do a questionnaire in advance, online or otherwise, via email, do it as and when they come to their appointment or their allotted time, and go, you know, how are you feeling? Have you been exposed recently? Are you symptomatic? Blah, blah, blah. And these are fine questions. You also need to do the track and trace thing. Visitors may turn up and not have a mask. Occasionally, I've gone out and completely forgotten a mask. It's slowly getting habit for everybody, but some people still forget, or they had a disposable mask, but they ripped it on the way because they're crap and they tear ridiculously. So you might, if you want to have just a box of masks and hand sanitizer at the front door. So, you know, have a couple of hand sanitizer stations, one at the front door, one at the bathrooms, one at the kitchen. But again, as part of your risk assessment, this is what you do. You assess your entire premises and go, where's our entrances? Where's our exits? Can we do a one-way system? Where should these hand sanitizers be? Where are visitors going to come in? How do we manage those visitors? You know, this is all part of the risk assessment. So the test and protect thing, and this is for people coming to your premises. So the collecting and storing of data, all you need is their name and number. You don't need address, you don't need date of birth, you don't need anything like that. So collecting and storing data. Now, John Smith and 07 blah, 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 isn't really personal data because it's personal data is identifiable markers. So a name and an address means you can find somebody. A name and a date of birth and an address, a national insurance number and a date of birth. A name and a number, you could possibly find somebody, so you do still need to comply with GDPR. So you should be disposing of the personal data register every 21 days. So you only keep it for 21 days maximum, then you chuck it out. You can just literally have a clipboard with lined paper and just name a number, name a number, name a number, and the date they were there. So the reason why we collect this data is if somebody then says, by the way, I've tested positive and I was at your premises on the 3rd. That means between the 3rd and your next deep clean, you contact everybody and go, just to let you know, we've had somebody within the premises and they've tested positive. We recommend if you self-isolate, and if you become symptomatic, you get a test. In Scotland, you can only get a test just now. It might change, but you can only get a test just now if you are symptomatic. So the cough, loss of taste, loss of smell, fever, whatever the main ones are. So if somebody gets a test and they say, I was at your premises on the 3rd, you then contact everybody who's there on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, whenever, to the point where you then got a deep clean. So if you got a deep clean on the 7th, you need to contact everybody between the 3rd and the 7th and say, just to let you know, we've had a positive test, we recommend you. Now, whether or not you have to tell the NHS is not actually clear. You can tell the NHS test and protect in Scotland, but I'm not sure if there's a legal requirement to do so. I think there should be, but I don't actually think there is. I think it's recommended and desired and best practice, etc. I would also recommend you do. You know, you give the NHS 24 a quick call, 111, just go, by the way, this is our premises. We've had a positive test from one of our service users or a staff member, just to let you know, we've contacted everybody, and that way the NHS are just aware of it. If they say we don't need to know, that's fine, but it probably would be best to let them know. The refusal to provide data. This is an interesting one because why would you refuse? If I go to a restaurant and somebody has a positive test who's there before me, I want to know. I want to know that I've been potentially exposed to the virus. Basically, you refuse entry. If somebody says, I'm not giving you my name or number, you go, well, unfortunately, we can't let you into premises. It's a legal requirement for us to take this data to protect the health, safety and well-being of our staff and service users. Therefore, we're not able to allow you into the service. And that's it. Somebody did tell me they went somewhere and the place was asking for their address as well. You don't need to provide your address. It's just name and number. You don't need anything else. Okay. Okay, what yeah, okay, what I think we should do, it's 11 o'clock just now, is take a wee 5 minutes before we get into the really fun part. The really fun part is where we talk really in depth about risk assessing and the practicalities of risk assessing and how to actually carry that out. George is saying a sanitizer station outside lifts is a good idea. Can you refuse a test if you're not symptomatic? Do you mean, can you refuse to have a test, or can you refuse to be given a test? If you phone up the NHS and ask for a test and you say you're not symptomatic, they won't give you an appointment. If you say you've got a dry cough, they will. You don't have, there's no legal obligation for you to take a test, if that's what you mean, George. Okay, let me stop the screen share just now for 2 minutes. Hey, hello everyone. Okay, so what we're going to do is take a wee 5-minute break, wee comfort break, Louise, if that's all right. Everybody want a wee 5 minutes? Bored of me talking to you? I see most of you are still here and most of you are still awake, so that's a pretty good thing actually. So always good to know. Okay, so I make it as 11 o'clock just now, so 11:05. If you're not back, you're going to miss out on the exciting part of in-depth risk assessing, so do bear that in mind. Okay, Louise?
Perfect. I'll pause the recording, so run away, get the kettles on. We'll see you in a few.
Cheers, coming back.
Got some thumbs up coming through, looks promising. Yep. Yep, lots of thumbs up. I think we're good.
Okay. We all good to go? Fabulous. I'm going to go back to screen share. Okay. Again, any comments or questions, just pop them in the chat box should you wish to do so. So, a risk assessment is identifying hazards and risks of things which could hurt somebody. That's basically the analysis of that. The reason why we assess risks is to prevent, protect the health, safety and well-being of all those within our premises. The hazard is what could happen, and the risk is what are the chances of it happening and who could be hurt. So the hazard is exposure to the virus. For the purpose of today, the only hazard we're looking at is exposure to the virus. Okay, that's all we're looking at. But you can apply a risk assessment to literally anything. So the hazard is exposure to the virus. The risk is probably going to be high at all times. And those potentially at risk of harm, everyone. Whether it's a child, an adult, an elderly person, those with underlying health conditions, etc. Everybody is at risk of getting exposure to the virus. The risk factor, as in low, medium or high, depends. So a 4-year-old, even if they did get the virus, it's not going to have a significant impact because kids don't really suffer particularly badly from it. If you have a 90-year-old who has diabetes and has had cancer, then the risk is much higher, and the risk being death. So what could happen is somebody could die. So we want to make sure that we understand how important it is to risk assess, to identify who could be harmed and how, what the exposure is and how we control that risk and control the hazard. You'll remember we talked about competent person. So competent and confident. I don't know if anyone here is a fire warden. Just because you happen to be a fire warden and have a fire warden certificate or a first aider, that doesn't necessarily mean something happens at that particular moment you're competent and confident. So there could be a fire and you panic. There could be somebody hurt who has blood gushing out an artery and you panic. That's normal and it's absolutely fine. Competent and confident means able to act there and then at the time. but it is situational. So again, when we're talking about competency, so you don't need to necessarily be formally certified to do something, but you need to be able to assess a certain level of knowledge and understanding of what it is. So by attending the training today, if you go away from today's session with a good understanding of how to carry out a risk assessment and what your responsibilities and accountabilities are, and how to review the risk assessment, how to go forward, etc., how to apply it to your premises, then you could be deemed as competent. So it is an individual thing. There's no legal definition, but you would need to be able to consider it as, if you were to stand up in court, could you justify your own competence, which I don't see an issue with. If you do the training today and you have a good understanding with, that should make you competent. When we talk about what to include in a risk assessment, the tasks or situations which might cause transmission of the virus. So you remember I said the Management Regs 99 states a risk assessment must be done before anybody does a task. So task or situation, so attending a premises, providing services, providing support, making a cup of tea or coffee, providing food, providing personal care. Who could be at risk? Everybody. That is, everybody could be at risk. And how likely is it someone could be exposed? You also have if somebody is exposed, how likely is it that they would have death? The highest risk factor would be death. Like we said, if it's a 23-year-old who's fit and healthy, chances are there's not going to be much of a risk there. If it's a 93-year-old, chances are there is a significant risk. An act to remove the task or situation, or if not possible, control the risk. And that's when we talk about control measures. And that's when, like, for example, your social distancing, your one-way system, PPE, sanitizers, deep cleaning. There's a whole host of things that you as an organisation can do to minimise the risk of exposure to the virus. What I'm going to do is, we're going to do this first. Right. So, very first step is identify the hazard, that which could cause harm. Okay, so the hazard is that which could cause harm, which is the virus. So exposure to coronavirus. Who might be harmed and how? Okay, so very, very simple steps. Anybody can do a risk assessment, anyone at all. It's fairly easy. You just kind of need to take it step by step. So anything which could cause harm? The virus. Who could be harmed and how? Staff, volunteers, service users, contractors, visitors, delivery persons, anyone attending the premises. Assess the risk level, probably going to be medium or high. Despite the fact there may be a vaccine coming out, apparently the UK has ordered 40 million doses, but each person needs 2 doses, which means there's only 20 million, and Britain has 75 million people. So at best, a quarter of the population might be vaccinated. It's 90% effective, apparently, so far in tests. So there's no guarantee the vaccine will come out, there's no guarantee it will come to Britain, and there's no guarantee everybody will get it. The people that will get it are those who are at highest risk, i.e. the elderly and those with underlying health conditions, as well as frontline workers. So the common man, those of us who are in the middle category, we're not going to get it anytime soon, let's be realistic. So the assessing the risk level is probably going to be medium to high. Step 4, what are the control measures? And that's easy. That's the simple stuff that we all know about because the government's been very, very clear. Social distancing, restricting numbers, one systems, PPE, face masks. Record the findings. That's your written risk assessment. Again, we mentioned we don't need a risk assessment if we have 5 or fewer staff, or fewer than 5 staff. However, I would always recommend have a written risk assessment because that way you can share your findings and give a copy of the risk assessment to everybody, or make them aware of it, where it is, get them to familiarise themselves with it, and review the risk assessment. And again, like we mentioned, we need to review it as and when required. So a normal risk assessment annually would be fine. Your fire risk assessment annually, your manual handling risk assessment, lone working, home working, slip, trips and falls, all this kind of stuff. It's just, you know, an annual kind of check to make sure it's all still up to date would be fine. But with coronavirus, things are changing daily. The level of tiers, restriction tiers, etc., are changing daily, weekly. It's really important that the risk assessment you have is kept up to date and accurate, because any changes could mean you're potentially breaching the law, and you're potentially putting people at increased risk. And the other side of the coin to bear in mind is you could actually be more restrictive on yourself than is necessary. So by having a 2 metre rule, whereas you actually only need to have 1 metre rule, which might mean you're allowed an extra 10 people in your premises. You know, so staff and services, you can provide more services, you can support more individuals more times throughout the day. So you need to be really, really careful when you're considering the risk assessment for your own premises of what it is you can actually do and how you go about doing that. Okay. So what we're going to do is look at an example risk assessment. Now, I'm not sure if I can, nope. I'm not sure how to go about swapping what I want to share. Bear with me 2 ticks. I might need to stop the share and restart the share. Bear with me too. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay. So what we're going to do is have Louise, I can see your little face. Can you see that okay? Word document? Cool. Okay, so what we're going to do is go through this together. So this is an example. Like I mentioned at the start, this will be sent out to everybody at the end of the session, so don't worry about reading it or writing anything down. Just move it over so you can see it. So this is this document here, you might notice is a huge amount of pages. It's 8 pages. Basically what I've done is I've had a look at a huge amount of potential hazards and risks and exposure and control measures. This is the kind of thing where I would not expect to walk into one of your premises and see this risk assessment. This could be a template, a style, hints and tips, a starter for 10. If you took this and copy and pasted it to your own style, then that's not sufficient. It's not appropriate because it wouldn't be based on your own individual premises. So what I've had a look at is what could happen and to whom. What I reckon the risk level is and what some potential control measures are, as well as additional potential actions. But when we talk about reasonably practicable, okay, so you could put, you could buy a dozen hazmat suits and you could have your premises deep cleaned 5 times a day. Financially, that's not feasible. Practically trying to get people to do that, it's not reasonably practicable. So it's not reasonable for an organisation to put those level of measures in place. But these are a variety of things here that we can look at, and we've considered staff, customers, contractors, drivers coming to the organisation, drivers going out from the organisation, visitors as in service users. And this one specifically is about washing hands and what we can do to make sure people wash their hands. And the most important thing is providing facilities for that. So having your hand sanitizer stations, if you go to supermarkets or retail centres, I'm trying to think of the term, I can't think of it, like Silverburn or Braehead or that kind of place. There's sanitizer stations everywhere. You go into Debenhams, there's sanitizer stations all over the place. So having them regularly and reminding people, you know, wash your hands on a regular basis. So these are all things that you can consider putting in, but you have to apply this to your own premises. Okay, so your own organisation, when you are risk assessing, these are all the things you think, can I put this in place? Is this reasonably practicable? Can we afford to do this? Would it be actually more practical to just give a little bottle of sanitizer to everybody? You know, if it's only staff that are coming into your premises, you could just give, thanks retail outlets, George, you could just give a bottle of sanitizer to all your staff. You know, so if it's only staff, you don't deal directly with service users, it's all phone or whatever service you provide, like food drops or service drops or whatever. Wee bottle of sanitizer to everybody would be the cheapest option. But If you have visitors coming and going, people coming and going, having sanitizer stations would probably be a more appropriate option. So bear that in mind. Okay. The next hazard we've had a look at is common use areas. Okay, so this is where people walk about the premises. Okay, and we've had a look at what kind of people they are. I don't know if you can see when I use my mouse and highlight, but we've had a look at the people, and again we've said hi, because until we're in level 0 and there's a cure. I know there's a vaccine, but realistically, if you consider the amount of people on the planet, there's 7.3 billion people on the planet. Realistically, this time next year, I'll be lucky. You know, how old am I? 39. I've got mild asthma, but it's not significant. You know, I don't have any really significant risk exposures. I work from home. I'm probably not going to get access to the vaccine until this time next year. Realistically, you know, there's people that need it way more than I do. I'd rather my dad, who's 69, got it than I did. You know, so realistically, those who are youngish, fitish and healthy-ish will get it way after. So I'm going to keep I've looked at the exposure risk, and I consider high to be prevalent continuously. So again, we've got a whole host of things here. This is a huge amount of information here that we could look at. These are all the things that we could consider. And again, if I saw anybody after today's session using this as a risk assessment, I'd be really disappointed. I really would. I would just be disappointed in you. You know, I wouldn't be angry. I wouldn't be upset. You would just disappoint me. So these are all the things that are kind of like start over 10 things to think about, and what would apply to your premises, what wouldn't apply. This is the same hazard. Okay, so this is your communal areas with even more possible control measures. There's so many things that you could think about for your premises. And it's an individual thing. This is why somebody said, well, can you tell me what to put in my risk assessment? I said, no, I would need to come to your premises and physically do it with you in order to know what to put in your risk assessment. The whole point is it's your risk assessment for your premises. So you need to identify what your risks are and what control measures are reasonably practicable. We've also had a look at travelling to and from work together and not cleaning surfaces, equipment and workstations. Now the travelling currently, you're not allowed to travel in a vehicle together unless absolutely necessary. You're also not meant to go to or from England because they're in the highest level, and you're also not meant to travel between restricted zones unless absolutely necessary. Now, the travel to and from England and the travel between restricted zones doesn't apply to work, okay? The sharing a vehicle does apply to work. So if you have staff who commute together, jump in the car together, very few people are using public. I love the fact we're trying to be really, really good with the environment and go over it. Everybody use trains and electric trains, you know, and new buses and electric taxis, and nobody use cars because they're so bad. Wait, everybody jump in your car. Nobody use public transport. Ironically though, with this is just a random tangent for you. So the UK has very, very strict environmental carbon emission targets. Now, at the peak of lockdown, okay, when the entire country was completely shut down and the amount of vehicles, etc., air travel, you name it, nothing was happening. The amount of pollutants were almost zero, you know, the lowest they've ever been in 100 years. Well, okay, 100 years were industrial, but you know what I mean. Even at the peak of lockdown, we still didn't meet our target, which means it's an impossible target, because if we can't meet it when we're not doing anything, we'd have to go back into, you know, Neanderthal days when we literally didn't use anything at all. So our targets are completely unrealistic, but I digress. This is what I was warning Julie about, the fact that I go off on significant tangents when I'm doing training. Anyways, yeah, don't travel to work together unless you absolutely have to. You can travel between zones and you can travel to and from England if you have to for work purposes. If you get stopped by the police, you should probably have a letter on your person at your time, so that you can show them saying, I am working for this organisation, it's really important I do so, here's my ID badge, etc. Does it matter if you accidentally put a control measure in the further actions column and further action? No, this is not a risk assessment. This is just a hints and tips. This form here is just me giving you loads and loads and loads of ideas. Loads, so it's further actions to consider. So you've got your control measures, which are the main things, but then you've got further actions, which, other things that you could think about. These are all hints and tips, thinking thoughts, things to consider, things to look at, of how you could reduce the risk from high to medium or low and protect all these people from getting the virus. Okay, so you've got a big list of people. The hazard, the hazard is them getting or spreading the virus. So all these measures here and all the further actions that you need to consider are how we reduce the risk, control the hazard and protect these people. Another one we've looked at was mental health, which is a significant one. I speak to everyone between management and chief execs and board members and chairs, etc. Everybody is struggling. Everybody is struggling mentally because the nights are coming in quicker, the days are getting dark, or they're much darker. You're working from home, you're not socialising, you're not seeing your colleagues, friends, family. Everybody has been affected by mental health. So we need to think about how do we support our staff. An interesting idea that I heard recently was protected time. So it was an idea that my husband's organisation have introduced, which is between the hours of 12 and 2 is protected time, which means no meetings and no appointments, no, and don't be wrong, if your service is, it's depending on your service, obviously. But yeah, protected time, so between 12 and 2, no meetings or appointments or scheduled anything, training or otherwise. And what that does is it allows you during the day, when it's actually daylight, to have some time to yourself. So if you want to take your lunch and go for a walk, want to go to the shops, want to do something, so rather than waiting to the end of the day when it's pitch black and you have to go shopping, you get protected time during the day. Now, you feel the thing about, oh, well, I'm contracted to 7 hours a day and that means I would need to work earlier. It's like, well, you know what? Mental health is more important. If somebody goes off with work-related stress or low mood, depression, anxiety, etc., they're going to be off long term. So let's be proactive about this and support our team members by encouraging our staff to go out for an hour during the day. Yeah, okay, they might be a wee bit slower getting their work to you, but they're going to be still working and they're going to feel valued. They're going to be supported. They're going to be grateful to the organisation for doing whatever the organisation can do at these ridiculously difficult times. Social distancing. So we need to make sure this is really important. And these are all the options. I'll say all the options. There's a variety of things. So you can see there's a whole load of control measures there, like marker tape on the floor. You'll have seen in shops and everything, they've got wee arrows, go this, one way only kind of thing. Virtual meetings rather than face-to-face, staggering start end times. And there's another whole load of things that you can think about. There's a whole host of things here. Musculoskeletal disorders. Now, based on the wonderful little pictures that you have behind you, I'm going to assume a lot of people here are working from home. Now, prior to working from home, which is a task, your organisation was legally required under the Management Regs 99 to carry out a risk assessment. I'm going to assume, and I will be very, very, very impressed if anyone here has had a home working risk assessment done. Specifically DSE, which is display screen equipment, i.e. your workstation. If anybody has, I'm going to be super, super, super impressed. If you haven't, you need to get every member of your staff a home working and DSE assessment done immediately. If somebody suffers a musculoskeletal injury, repetitive strain injury, or otherwise, because you haven't carried out a risk assessment and you haven't provided them with an appropriate workstation, you could potentially be liable. And you're looking at absences as well. Okay, we've got ventilation as well, something else to think about. So how do we make sure that we've got lots of fresh air? Stagnant air is an important one. Something to consider when it comes to stagnant air is if you have an air conditioning system, turn it off unless it draws in external air. So no air conditioning or ventilation system should be used unless it draws in air from the outside. If you can't draw in air from the outside, then just turn it off and have your windows open. Fire door should never be propped open. If I came into premises and I saw a fire door propped open, especially the best one to prop over a fire door is a fire extinguisher. No, unacceptable. Do not do it. It is unacceptable if under any circumstances to prop a fire door open. You have some doors which are automatically closing in the event of a fire. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people actually setting up something in front of a fire door to prevent it from closing. Vulnerable staff, clinically vulnerable staff, new and expecting mothers, etc. Again, variety of things to consider. What can we do? Exposure in the workplace, and that's where we use PPE. Now, PPE, you'll see, is a very, very, very last thing in this risk assessment, because everything else should be looked at before PPE. PPE is your last resort. We want to eliminate the risk. We want to control the risk with management controls, and then we add in PPE at the very end. PPE is obviously your face masks, which is a legal requirement. So it kind of is probably more important than it should normally, but normally speaking, your PPE is a very, very, very last resort. George, I'm sorry to hear you have your satellite on, but they're really quite good. Satellites is natural sunlight, so it gives you your vitamin D, etc., and makes you feel better. But if you can get out during the day, and today here anyway is a lovely autumn day, it's nice and dry. It's a bit depressing outside because I've got a big giant tree. It's like a 100-foot tree, but it's like lost all its leaves, so it looks quite desolate. But it's daylight, so I could walk around to the shops and go and get my lunch. And that gets me outside, gets me exercise, gets me fresh air, and it gets me out in the daylight rather than waiting until 5 o'clock when it's pitch black. So there's an idea for you. What I'm going to do here is stop the screen share and go back into a different screen share, because what we're going to do now is we're going to do a risk assessment together. Isn't this exciting? So we're going to go for, this is just a template. You guys can change it to whatever you want. The HSC also have a different template. Any organisation that I can't spell. Okay, and the assessment carried out by Natasha Gordon. And it's carried out on the 10th November 2020. Ooh, 2020. And we're going to go for a task. And that's to be completed. Okay, assessment carried out and date carried out. What does that mean? No idea. I'll fix that. Okay, so what I'd like to do is somebody, in the chat box, give me a task. So I need a volunteer to volunteer a task or activity. If nobody volunteers, I'll pick somebody, so do bear that in mind. Come on, we need a task from somebody. Louise, I'm going to pick on you if you don't get any volunteers.
There's a few going in there.
Oh, I can't see it.
We've got, so
I can't see the chat.
Oh, right. So I panicked and I said it could be carrying out a mailing, so doing kind of franking letters and things like that. Somebody else has said community food drops. Somebody said lifting boxes of books, some sort of manual handling task, carrying a ream of photocopying paper from the storeroom to the office.
Okay, we're going to go for
loads of them.
Food, for some reason, I do apologise, the chat is not coming up for me and I don't know why. Apologies. Right, food drop. Who said food drop? Unmute yourself.
L. Brown.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Food drop in the community.
Yeah.
Okay, can you see this Word document and can you see me typing?
I can, yeah.
Right, okay. So food drop in the community. What's your hazard?
Passing on the virus via the food itself, perhaps.
Yeah, okay. And who could be hurt and how?
The person delivering it and the person receiving the food package.
Okay, and what do you reckon? Is it low, medium or high?
It'd be high, especially if it's an elderly person.
Okay, and how are you going to control the risk?
You could have the food sitting in the storeroom for a particular number of days. So the virus dies off.
Practical for food hygiene for keeping it fresh?
Maybe just have tins and canned foods, maybe not fresh foods.
Okay. What else can you do?
What's that, sorry?
So what else could you do?
You could sanitize your hands before and after handling the food, and maybe recommend the person receiving the food to do so as well.
Yep. For a public. There we go. Okay. What else could you do?
Sorry, I'm feeling bad for you.
No, I'm going to pick on everybody. Don't worry. We're going to pick on several people. Don't worry.
Volunteers to wear masks and PPE.
Yeah. There you go. Masks and PPE. Okay. So, what about leave on doorstep?
Yeah.
Step back. What
And
else?
maybe just have the same volunteer every week, so for that certain house set.
Okay. And what you could do is check. Well, no, I was going to say check public whether they're healthy or not, but if you leave it on the doorstep. But there's a good amount of control measures, which are, so you're, I mean, don't get me wrong, for you doing your risk assessment, you're going to go into a bit more depth than this. But there is a wee list of control measures for people delivering and receiving food who are high at risk to exposure to the virus when dropping food in the community. Right, Louise, give me another one.
Oh, mine was boring. It was doing a mail out to our members, so from the office, using the Frankie machine, computers, things like that.
Okay, so office, let's just call it office work. What's your exposure? Sorry, what's your hazard?
Exposure to the virus.
Yes, it is. If anybody says anything other than exposure to the virus, I'm going to bin you from the course. Who's at risk?
Workers, volunteers, visitors, the postie, anybody that comes into contact with us.
Okay, and how are you going to avoid risk to these? Oh, sorry, what risk is it? What's the level of risk?
High.
And how are you going to control the risk, the high risk to these people from exposure to the virus when doing office work?
So we're going to wear our masks in communal areas.
Okay.
We're going to abide by the one-way system in the office and the distancing.
Yep.
Going to sanitize on entry to any new room. Our hands, not everything. We're going to, we've got antibacterial wipes to wipe down any equipment that we used before and after using it. We've not been using our kitchen. Well, we've been working from home primarily, but when anyone goes into the office, we've just had a rule that no using the kitchen, just to avoid that completely.
Yeah, I heard of one member who actually turned the microwave around the wrong way and taped the fridge shut. I'm like, oh, come on. I was like, be sensible, you know, just clean your hands and clean, you know, give it a wee wipe before and a wee wipe after, you're fine. But yes, but there you go. That's literally, you've got all these control measures to protect these people from a high risk of exposure to the virus for doing office work. Right, next. See, this is easy. Who said risk? Health and safety, man, you gotta love health and safety. Who said health and safety was difficult? Right, give me another one. Louise, pick somebody.
I'm gonna pick on Linda.
Right, Linda, what's your activity?
I'm unmuted. Okay, so accepting donations from the public in a charity shop.
Okay, so public donations. What's your hazard?
Exposure to the virus.
Yes, it is. And who's at risk?
The staff.
Yep.
Volunteers.
Yep.
Public.
Yep. Anyone else?
No, that's about everybody covered, I think.
And what's your risk level?
High.
Okay, and how are you going to protect everybody? How are you going to protect those people from a high risk of exposure to the virus when getting public donations?
So wear PPE.
Yep.
Leave the donations for 72 hours before anything's done with them.
Yep.
One-way system in the shop. Social distancing for volunteers, staff. Sanitizing station coming into the shop. There's a limit to how many people can come into the shop at once.
Yep.
Limit the number of volunteers helping in the shop.
Yep. No, that's fine. Honestly, that's fine. So you've got a whole load of control measures to protect these people from high risk of exposure to the virus when dealing with public donations. Do we all get where this is going? Does this all make sense? See, everybody thinks risk assessment is really, really complicated. It's not. What do we do to stop these people from getting hurt by this? That's it. There's our activity. What's our risk? How do we protect them? There we go. That's it. Control measure. The responsible person is obviously whoever's responsible to the manager, the person in charge of the service, who's in charge of the building, etc. Do you want to do another couple just for the crack? Louise, does anybody else want to do one just for the crack? Or do we all kind of see where this is going?
They're looking at me as if to say, don't pick on me next. So maybe just just leave them alone.
This should make it, all of these control measures are roughly the same. You know, so if you're dealing with, say for example, you've got staff who do lone working, i.e. food dropping in the community, going out and about by themselves. A lone working risk assessment is going to have roughly the same information in it on how you're going to protect that individual person. You know, communication, phone calls, text messages, you know where they're going from and to, they're in an appropriate vehicle, they've got insurance and petrol and breakdown cover, etc., etc. There's a whole load of things. You might have a couple of things which are more specific to that individual person or that individual circumstance, that individual activity. But roughly speaking, for a lone working risk assessment, the control measures are going to be roughly the same. All these control measures, there's not a huge amount of difference between them. And these are only 3 little activities. Now we've got 19 participants today. I think that maybe includes me and Louisa. But we could do 19 of these and they're all going to have plus or minus these control measures. So when you're looking at risk assessing your own premises, yes, okay, I showed you that big giant one, which I will send you, of course. It was making it really to the point. You know, it was going, look, these are all the things that you could consider. But this list of control measures here are sufficient and reasonably practicable. So these are all the things that we can easily put in place, we can easily implement, and they will protect all of these people from this hazard when doing these activities. See, simple, as the meerkat would say. Right, let me stop that and go back to my presentation, wherever it is. Cool. So we've gone through an example of risk assessment. That's how easy it is. Now, the important part about this is staff participation and the buy-in. Now, I have been regularly accused of being ridiculously enthusiastic and nuts about health and safety. Well, who isn't? Because health and safety is one of the most fascinatingly interesting subjects on the planet. It's not. Health and safety is boring, really, really dull and boring. It's like finance, it's just boring. However, it is an absolute necessity. We must protect the health, safety and well-being of everyone. That's ourselves and those around us. If management, if the board, if the chief exec, if the leaders don't buy in, why should anyone else? We need to be a good example. We need to be enthusiastic. We need to be excited. We need to make it interesting, because health and safety is not interesting. Every single time you've used the words health and safety to your staff, how many of them haven't groaned or rolled their eyes? You can guarantee out of 10 people, 1 person will sit there and not roll their eyes because they didn't hear you properly. Or they're on the phone, or they're thinking about something else. So everybody hates health and safety. So this is why it's really getting the buy-in is a really, really important part. We need to make sure everybody understands it is really, really important for them and for those around them. Participating in the risk assessment. Now that is all about the competency again. So we want management to take part, but we also want the staff to take part. Risk assessment should really be done by the person who owns the risk. So when we talk about somebody going out and delivering food in the community, should it be the manager who sits in the lovely warm office with a cup of coffee? Or should it be the person who actually gets in the vehicle with that manual handling load and goes out and about into the community and meets people? It's the person at risk who should be involved in the risk assessment process. they're the ones that need to say to you, well, actually, I don't know Clackmannanshire, so I'm going to have to use Glasgow analogy. You know, if you're going to Postle, Ruckhill, you know, if you're going to somewhere in the East End, you know, your risk is going to be higher than if you're going to somewhere in Shawlands or Bearsden. You know, so you've got individual people going out and about by themselves in winter when it's pitch black. The road conditions aren't great, visibility is not great. So if you have staff, by getting them to participate in the process, you're getting them to buy in because they feel they have ownership of the document. They've helped create this item. If staff refuse to take part or wear PPE, potentially, this is where HR comes in. That is a disciplinary matter. Staff cannot refuse to take part in health and safety because it is a requirement. It is a reasonable management instruction, and health and safety supersedes all and everything. Health and safety trumps every other law there is, including discrimination. Okay, so health and safety is the be all and end all. It is absolute. If staff refuse to take part or participate or comply, then potentially you are looking at disciplinary action. And that could be as serious as gross misconduct dismissal, because if they are putting themselves or others at risk of death. Okay, now I'm taking this to the extreme here, so do bear that in mind. I'm taking it properly to the extreme. But if somebody has the virus, they know they have the virus, they come to work, they don't wear PPE, they don't wash their hands, they support service users who are elderly, vulnerable, underlying health conditions, and they infect those people, they have knowingly killed someone. That's the extremity of it. That is as far as it could go. So staff refusing to take part in health and safety is unacceptable under any circumstances. The first conversation would be not gross misconduct dismissal. The first conversation is, you need to do this, and this is why you need to do it. It's explaining why and getting them to participate in the process. But if thereafter they're aware they have breached health and safety, they have refused a reasonable management instruction, and they have put themselves, those around them, members of the public, and the organisation at significant risk. Okay, because you have reputational damage to consider. And if you, as an organisation, have inadvertently, indirectly caused the death of a dozen service users who were vulnerable, that's not going to be good for your reputation, to be perfectly honest. George says he's a union rep and I'm correct. Woohoo! I'm not just making it up. Funnily enough, I can see the chat now. Don't ask me why I can now see it, but yeah, I can now see it, but yeah. Thanks, George. Appreciate that. It's always nice when a union rep agrees with HR. It's such a rare thing for a union to agree with HR. I dealt with one the other day, and he started giving his personal opinion about a case, and I went, I'm sorry, but I'm not even acknowledging this because that's not appropriate. And he went, actually, Natasha, you're just HR. You're there to advise, not tell me what is and isn't appropriate. Yeah, I know. I ended that call quite quickly. Anyways, so yeah, potentially. We don't jump straight to dismissal, but you have to make staff aware of what the potential is. So you are going to be pleased to hear that you no longer have to hear me talk absolute nonsense at you, but we should have a basic understanding. I don't expect you, I'm not going to now ask everybody, you know, what year did the Management Regs come out? What year did the Corporate Manslaughter and Homicide Act come out? Because I don't expect anyone to remember any of that. But I expect you to have a basic understanding of liability, of what it means and why there is law, the importance of it, what a hazard is, what a risk is, how to deal with control measures, and bad practice, human life. Oakley dokley. So we have 10 minutes for any comments, questions specifically about your own organisation, premises or otherwise, about this risk assessment, any other health and safety matter, any HR matter or otherwise. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in if that's okay, Natasha. So we've had a few groups come to us and I kind of want to make sure that I'm giving them the right advice here. So I'm going to ask you, obviously staff legally have to comply with health and safety, but some of our organisations have felt it's a bit of a grey area with their volunteers, with volunteers not wanting to wear PPE. And they're saying, do you know, how can we push that point? What if we lose volunteers? And I've kind of taken the line of, well, yeah, exactly that, tough. If they're not going to, I'm sorry, you look at different volunteers. This is people's safety. So you'd say that's quite appropriate then? Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, it's law. Second of all, they're acting on behalf of the organisation. They're representing the organisation, and whilst acting on behalf of the organisation, they are covered by the organisational health and safety. So the health and safety supersedes absolutely anything. It doesn't necessarily apply to employment law. It applies to all within the premises, or out with the, if they're acting on behalf of the organisation, whether inside or outside the premises. Tough would be my response. If they don't want to do it, no problem at all. Thanks for your help. See you later.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Stunned silence, Natasha. That's what you've got just now.
Either I've answered every question that could ever come up, or you guys just fell asleep during and you're just like, yeah, it's fine, stop talking. Sorry, Linda.
About as far as donations go, from the public, is it still 72 hours?
Yeah. There is, I mean, don't get me wrong, if anybody is a medical virologist here, please do feel to jump in. There's comments about, well, the virus lasts 12 hours, it lasts 12 weeks. I think 72 hours is kind of deemed as a reasonable amount of time. But the amount of time the virus is live for on surfaces, I think on hard surfaces it lasts longer than soft surfaces, i.e. clothing and that kind of thing. I think 72 hours is reasonable.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So we've just had a comment backing that up as well, saying it's dependent on surfaces. So absolutely, yeah. Any other questions at the moment? I know that's quite a lot to digest, and we all want to go away and have a look through that example risk assessment.
Yeah, honestly, if anybody copies it, I'll not be impressed. But I will send that out to everybody, as well as a copy of the slides and the one we filled in as well, just so you can see that, to see what we did together. Yeah, I'll send you my contact information. So in case, I'll send it to Louise and she can forward it on in case anybody wants any random questions or anything. George.
Natasha, you've actually just answered the question I was going to ask you. Could we contact you? And you've just said, you're going to send all your contact details to Louise. So you preempted my
See that? It's got some psychic, George.
Yeah.
You're clearly a nice union rep, like most of the ones I deal with. So I'm happy to help as much as I can.
Me being a union rep, we don't usually deal with HR in this informal manner like this. I'm usually sitting across the table from them.
Yeah, I've dealt with several. Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna keep my opinions to myself on that one. But yeah,
I'll send you have to referee some sort of union HR standoff here. Let's not go there. It's being recorded. I don't know if it's a question for now or a question on if it's a separate session. But Russell's asking outdoor activities and the sort of.
Yeah, they kind of comply with the same as everything else. Social distancing is required. You don't need to wear PPE because you're outside. You do need to make sure that while social distancing is complied with, you don't need to worry about numbers. So it's not the same thing because it's providing services or work. But yeah, social distancing, hand sanitizing, etc. And it would form part of your risk assessment. If it's outdoor, you've got the weather, the light, etc. to concern yourself about, as well as transport to and from.
Okay, thank you. Honestly, I think that's been a really thorough session and you've acknowledged it yourself, so I don't feel bad in saying this, but health and safety can be a bit of a tedious topic. And I think you've managed to keep it quite light and fun and interesting, so thank you very much for that.
Happy to help.
Certainly flown by the 2 hours for me anyway. If there's no other questions, we shall release you back out into the wild for the rest of your day. And as Natasha said, she's more than happy to have people contact her. So as soon as I get the information over, I'll make sure that goes out to everybody. Did you have an evaluation or anything you wanted sent out as well, Natasha?
I don't know if you guys did. For myself, no. But I didn't know if you guys wanted to do ones. And you've obviously got the recording, so you can choose to do with it whatever you wish.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. And thanks again, Natasha. It has been a really good session. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
See everybody soon. Bye just now.